Well, good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to see all of you here this evening. My name's Dr. James Paharic. I'm the director of our National Catholic Center for Holocaust Education. And I'm very excited to be here tonight because it's a special Fleischner Lecture. We do the Fleischner Lecture every year, but this year it's our 35th anniversary. And we have members of the Fleischner family with us. And we also have an address from Dr. Carol Rittner that will focus on the work of Eva Fleischner. And so it's an exciting evening. Let's begin the festivities with a prayer from Sister Maureen O'Brien, the Vice President for Mission and Identity here at Seton Hill University.
Thank you, and good evening. Let us pray. Praised are you, God of the universe, who keeps us alive, sustains us, and brings us to this moment. We are grateful for this moment in which we gather to celebrate and give thanks for the vision and courage of the founders of the National Catholic Center for Holocaust Education, especially to Sister Gemma Del Duca, who, when asked why we should establish the center at Seton Hill, replied with faith, determination, and courage in the spirit of the Sisters of Charity, because it's the right thing to do. And so it happened. We thank you, gracious God, for those who have sustained the mission of the center throughout these 35 years, for those present and those who have gone before us. May their memory be a blessing. We pray for an end to the spread of lies and prejudices that continue to fuel anti-Semitism. That blindness be lifted from those who believe and perpetuate false ideologies. Replace lies with truth that requires transformation, not only of the mind, but also of the heart. We ask, God of Hesed and Agape, that you inspire and bless those who, in the spirit of Vatican II and Nostra Aetate, continue efforts to foster Jewish-Christian dialogue and to bring an end to hatred and division in our world. We honor our friend and colleague, Dr. Carol Rittner, Sister of Mercy, who has dedicated her life and ministry to Torah and gospel, and who by her scholarship and her example reminds us of the words of Elie Wiesel: the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. Amen.
Good evening. As president of Seton Hill University, it is my privilege to welcome you to the Eva Fleischner Lecture this evening. Tonight, noted Holocaust scholar and dear friend of Seton Hill, Dr. Carol Rittner, will present the Eva Fleischner Lecture and will receive the National Catholic Center for Holocaust Education Nostra Aetate Award for her tremendous work in advancing Christian-Jewish relations. Seton Hill and the National Catholic Center for Holocaust Education are proud to host the Eva Fleischner Lecture Series. Eva was a dedicated faculty member who became a remarkable pioneering Holocaust scholar and educator. She was a longtime member of the National Catholic Center for Holocaust Education Advisory Board and friend of Seton Hill. And she herself was a recipient of the Nostra Aetate Award. The funding for this lecture series was made possible thanks to an extraordinary leadership commitment from the late Hans and Leslie Fleischner, Eva's brother and sister-in-law. In addition to the Fleischner Lecture Series, their generosity is enabling Seton Hill to continue and expand the university's effort around Holocaust education and to combat disinformation and the polarization of our society through the Eva Fleischner Truth-Finding Program, the Eva Fleischner Oral History Project, and the publication of The Memory of Goodness, a compilation of Eva's essays co-edited by tonight's speaker, Carol Rittner. Please join me in thanking the Fleischner family for all that they have done for Seton Hill and through these efforts, all of us at Seton Hill hope to educate people today and in the future of the deadly toll that disinformation and hatred takes on humankind, and to become a model for other institutions of higher education throughout the country. I would now like to welcome Chris Fleischner, son of Hans and Leslie, and nephew of Eva, who will introduce tonight's speaker.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, President Finger. Those were some lovely words about my parents. My name's Chris Fleischner, and it's my pleasure to introduce this evening's speaker, Dr. Carol Rittner, who's a member of the Sisters of Mercy. First, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate the center's 35th anniversary. Sister Gemma and everybody who's been involved over the years, you've done remarkable work. My aunt, Dr. Eva Fleischner, was deeply committed to the work of the center, served on the advisory board for many years, and spoke at and participated in a number of conferences and events. I'm thankful to my parents, Leslie and Hans Fleischner, who have been longtime supporters of the center, and although my father passed away this past November, he would have loved to have been here and chatting with everybody tonight. After Eva's passing, my parents helped endow a lecture series in Eva's name that enables scholars to come to the Seton Hill campus to discuss their research on the Holocaust, genocide, and interreligious understanding. Tonight's speaker, Dr. Carol Rittner, is a lifelong learner and a passionate educator, and someone who knew Eva from back in the 1980s. Dr. Rittner is a distinguished professor emerita of Holocaust and Genocide Studies, and the Dr. Marsha Raticoff Grossman Professor Emerita of Holocaust Studies at Stockton University. Dr. Rittner authored and edited many books and essays in various scholarly and educational journals about the Holocaust and other genocides of the 20th and 21st centuries. She's lectured around the world, and since 2009, Dr. Rittner has edited the proceedings of the Lafrac Conference, the Lafrac Holocaust Education Conference held here at Seton Hill University. Most recently, along with Dr. John Roth, Dr. Rittner edited The Memory of Goodness, Eva Fleischner and Her Contribution to Holocaust Studies. The book collects Eva's most important essays on Christian-Jewish relations, Holocaust rescuers, and teaching the Shoah. And a quick promotion, there are books available for sale outside as you leave if you want. It really is a good read. I have to say, I've learned a lot from my aunt. When I was growing up, she had already pretty much retired, so I didn't speak to her much about her scholarly work, but it's been a great chance for me to reconnect with the past, and I think her writings from the past years are just as relevant as they are today. The title of tonight's lecture this evening is Eva Fleischner, Conscience and Courage. Please help me welcome Dr. Carol Rittner.
Well, Dr. Rittner, we wanted to keep this a surprise, but the cat is out of the bag by now, and you know that you will be the recipient of our award this evening. In 1965, during the Second Vatican Council, the Council proclaimed in a document called Nostra Aetate the need for closer relationships between the Catholic Church and those of other faiths, particularly Judaism. And since that time, those of us who are Catholic have been on a journey toward a more deeper understanding of Judaism and have been fostering a more accurate knowledge of Judaism among our students. And so here at the center, we came up with the idea of giving an award to honor those who have done the most to further our mission of promoting Jewish Catholic understanding. By the way, the words Nostra Aetate, as some of you know, in the papal encyclicals, they often begin with the first words. Nostra Aetate is Latin for in our time. And in the encyclical, it said, in our time, we must foster these closer relations between Catholics and Jews. And so, in the 35 years of our center, we've only given this award 8 times to people who truly deserve the award, and certainly Dr. Rittner is one of those people. So I am happy to present you with the Nostra Aetate Award.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My thanks to everyone at Seton Hill University and the National Catholic Center for Holocaust Education for honoring me with the Nostra Aetate Award. I stand in the company of intellectual and moral giants, Edward Flannery, Jan Karski, Judy Banke, Eva Fleischner, Jean Fisher, John Palikowski, Vicki Barnett, and Mary Boyes, all of whom have been given this award. Whether they know it or not, every one of them, through their publications and their lectures, has been a teacher and mentor to me, instructing me and modeling for me how to engage in the important work of Christian-Jewish dialogue and why we must teach about the Holocaust. Over the years, I had the privilege of meeting all the previous Nostra Aetate honorees except the late Father Edward Flannery. His comment, however, that the pages of history Jews have committed to memory are the very ones that have been torn from Christian and secular history books, has had an enormous impact on me and on my own writing and teaching about the Holocaust. I have tried to pay attention to those pages of history, especially the pages about anti-Judaism in Christian theology and the long centuries of Christian anti-Jewish preaching and teaching that prepared the seedbed in which Nazi racial anti-Semitism took root, grew, and spread prior to and during World War II and the Holocaust. Every one of these Nostra Aetate honorees exemplifies a listening heart, that character trait so necessary for dialogue with people who profess different religious, social, political, and cultural traditions than the majority population. As Pope Francis and Rabbi Abraham Skorka wrote in their book, On Heaven and Earth, dialogue is born from a respectful attitude toward the other person, from a conviction that the other person has something good to say. It supposes that we can make room in our heart for their point of view, their opinion, and their proposals. All of these previous Nostra Aetate awardees have made room in their hearts for their Jewish brothers and sisters, made room for their point of view, their opinion, and their proposals, and I can only hope to follow humbly in their footsteps. Dr. Eva Fleischner, honored in 1997 with the Nostra Aetate Award, had a listening heart and an inquisitive mind. It is obvious to me why she was given this award. From Montclair State College to Marquette University, from the Christian Scholars Group on Jewish-Christian Relations to the Church Relations and the Holocaust Committee of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, from Seton University's National Catholic Center for Holocaust Education to the Vatican's International Catholic Jewish Historical Commission. Eva's fingerprints, so to speak, are all over Catholic relations and dialogue with Jews, all over teaching about the Holocaust, particularly teaching Christians about the Holocaust. Her two books, Judaism in German Christian Theology since 1945, and Auschwitz, Beginning of a New Era, Reflections on the Holocaust, and I should mention her third book, Cries in the Night, not to mention her many essays published in journals and books, are evidence of her listening heart, her intellectual acuity, and her moral insight. Eva Fleischner was a woman of conscience and courage, a scholar and teacher who made me think about issues like anti-Judaism in Christian theology, bystanders and rescuers during the Holocaust, and of course, Pope Pius XII and the Vatican during the Holocaust. These are topics I would like to address this evening, but first a word about Eva herself. Eva Marie Elisabeth Fleischner was born in Vienna, Austria in 1925. She was 13 when the Nazis marched into her city in March of 1938, welcomed by many of her fellow citizens, perhaps even welcomed and cheered on by some of her friends and neighbors. After the 1938 annexation of Austria by Nazi Germany, Eva's father, a Jewish convert to Catholicism, saw the dangers that lay ahead for his family and for himself if they remained in Austria. He sent Eva and her brother Hans to England, where they were enrolled in Catholic boarding schools. Eva graduated from her convent school and in 1943 sailed from Liverpool to the USA on the HMS Britannia, the first wartime passenger ship carrying civilians from England to America. She attended Radcliffe College, graduated magna cum laude, took a job as an editorial assistant at Houghton Mifflin Publishing House in Boston, and became an American citizen, all in that order. In 1949, Eva returned to Europe, where she studied medieval philosophy as a Fulbright scholar at the University of Paris. During the 2 years Eva was in Paris, she encountered the post-war French Catholic Church, a church trying to come to terms with its failure to stand up for the Jews during World War II and the Holocaust. It was in Paris that Eva also met the Grail, an international movement begun in the Netherlands in 1921 by a Dutch Jesuit priest who envisioned a movement of young women under female leadership willing to give themselves totally to spreading the kingdom of God, not as nuns in the cloister, but as lay women in the midst of the modern world. Eva returned to the USA in June 1951. In 1952, she joined the Grail, and in 1957, she made a lifetime commitment to God as a member of the Grail. To the best of my knowledge, Eva remained faithful to that commitment until her death in July 2020. In the fall of 1963, the Grail sent Eva to Rome to participate in the second session of Vatican II as an observer and reporting correspondent for the publication Ecumenical News. Vatican II was an extraordinary event in the life of the Catholic Church. It was convened by Pope John XXIII in January 1959. Its purpose was to encourage the Church to find a creative response to the modern world. John XXIII said he wanted to open the windows of the Church and let in some light and air. He wanted the Church to engage in self-criticism, to look honestly at itself, to respond to the joys and hopes, the grief and anguish of the people of the modern world. It was during Vatican II that the Catholic Church discovered a new sense of solidarity with other religious communities, particularly with the Jewish community. Vatican II lasted from 1962 to 1965. Although Eva was only in Rome for one session, the second session, like so many of us at the time, even at a distance, she imbibed John XXIII's spirit of aggiornamento, the updating, spiritual renewal, and institutional reform the Council sought to bring about throughout the Catholic Church. In the spring of 1964, Eva traveled to Paris, where she spent a semester studying at the Advanced Catechetical Institute. There, she met Father Jacques Audinet, with whom she became friends. They talked about her family history and about Judaism. Eva knew, of course, that her father was Jewish by birth, a convert to Catholicism later in life. But neither her father nor her father's family had been observant Jews. Their Judaism was cultural, not religious. It was a faith about which Eva had no knowledge. That ignorance would persist until the late 1960s. By then, Eva was 40, enrolled in a doctoral program in Christian historical theology at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. As part of her doctoral studies, she took 2 graduate seminars, one on the Church Fathers, the other on Martin Luther's commentary on the Psalms. The topics, Eva writes, were separated chronologically by 1,000 years, but one theme kept cropping up in both seminars, and it profoundly shocked her: anti-Judaism in Christian teaching and preaching. These 2 seminars pricked her conscience, made her ask herself, what's going on here? Why this persistent animosity on the part of Christians, many of them canonized saints in the Church, toward the people to whom they owe the origins of their faith? At the same time that Eva was taking these 2 graduate seminars, a fellow student handed her a book with the words, "You must read this." The book was Treblinka by Jean-Francois Steiner. It was Eva's first real encounter with the Shoah, and she was profoundly shaken. A Holocaust began to haunt her. She read everything she could about the Holocaust, including Elie Wiesel's memoir, Night, and all his other books. She continued her doctoral studies, wrote a dissertation about Judaism in German Christian theology since 1945, graduated with her Ph.D., then joined the religion faculty at Montclair State College in New Jersey in 1973, where she remained until she retired at the end of the 1990-91 academic year. In June 1973, a group of 12 Jewish and Christian scholars, Eva among them, met at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City to talk about the Holocaust. The assembled scholars agreed there was some in-depth discussion taking place in various places, but not enough. more needed to be done. They decided to organize an international symposium on the Holocaust. It took place at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in June 1974. Leading Jewish and Christian scholars were invited to participate, and they did. Rabbi Irving Greenberg, Rosemary Radford Ruther, Emil Fackenheim, Father John Palikowski, and Elie Wiesel, among others, presented papers, engaged in discussion with other scholars, and with symposium participants. Eva edited the proceedings, which were published in 1977 under the title Auschwitz, Beginning of a New Era? Reflections on the Holocaust. In the spring of 1973, a few months before she began helping to plan and organize that international symposium, Eva began teaching a course on the Holocaust at Montclair State College. It was a course she continued to teach until she retired nearly 20 years later. In that first class, she found herself facing a varied and disparate group of students, ranging from freshmen to graduating seniors. There were a few Jews in the class, plus a Buddhist, a Muslim, a Roman Catholic nun, and others who were more or less Christian, or nothing in particular. The level about the Shoah in the class was very uneven, she said. So what did she teach them? I can only speculate, of course, but I would say she taught those first students, and subsequent ones as well, that the Holocaust was the systematic, bureaucratic extermination of 6 million Jews by the Nazis and their collaborators as a central act of state during the Second World War. She taught them the history and politics of Nazi Germany. She drew their attention to perpetrators, to the collaborators and the bystanders who made the Holocaust possible. And I think she challenged her students to ponder this question: is there something inherent in Christian teaching that created a context for the unprecedented anti-Semitism and mass murder of Jews during the Holocaust? Eva was acutely aware that the persecution, discrimination, and annihilation of Jews in Germany, Austria, Poland, and elsewhere in Nazi German-occupied Europe during World War II and the Holocaust took place on a continent that had been Christian for more than 1,500 years. I put the word Christian in quotation marks. Of course, Eva knew the Holocaust took place in Auschwitz and Birkenau, in Buchenwald and Bergen-Belsen, but she also knew that it took place in the shadow of the great cathedrals and churches in Christian Europe, in the centers of Christian teaching and preaching, in Rome and Augsburg, in Paris and Athens, in Krakow, Warsaw, Amsterdam, Prague, and in many other cities, towns, and villages throughout Christian Europe. These cities, towns, and villages had churches, Catholic and Protestant, if not on every corner, then on more than a few corners. Eva knew that in those cities, towns, and villages, Jews were rounded up, put in ghettos, deported, sometimes even shot under the windows and outside the doors of Christian institutions, within sight of an overwhelmingly Christian population. And she knew the citizens of those cities, towns, and villages continue to have Mass in their Catholic churches, sing hymns and pray in their Protestant churches, and celebrate ornate liturgies in their Eastern Orthodox Christian churches, even as the Jews were being stuffed into cattle cars, loaded onto trucks, and shot at the edge of pits by men who, for the most part, were baptized Christians. Eva did not remain silent about what she knew. She taught her students that the precedents for the Aryan laws, for the ghettos, pogroms, and the anti-Semitic rhetoric and imagery that permeated Nazi propaganda began much, much earlier than January 1933 and the Nazi ascent to power in Germany. She pointed out to her students that the targeting of Jews in Christian Europe can be found in the language of the Gospels and in the writings of the early church fathers. Down through the ages, the Christian churches, Catholic and Protestant alike, taught that the Jews killed Christ. In the Passion narrative in John's Gospel, for example, the Jews cry out, "Crucify him, crucify him." In Matthew's Gospel, the Christian faithful heard the Jews declare, "His blood be on us and on our children." These words and others from the Gospels and the Acts of the Apostles inflamed Christians. In some places, Christians literally considered it a religious duty during Holy Week to assault Jews as a punishment for the Jews' rejection of Jesus as the Christ of God. For nearly 1,500 years, the Christian churches taught that the Jews failed to recognize Jesus as the Messiah, that the Mosaic law, the Torah, was annulled, replaced by the law of Christ, which was a law of spirit and love, not a law of empty, meaningless Jewish burdens. Christian teachers and preachers taught that the Christians had replaced the Jews as God's chosen people. This teaching of supersessionism undergirds the teaching of contempt for Jews and Judaism that permeated Christian preaching and teaching for centuries. It was the seed ground that nurtured anti-Jewish attitudes among baptized Christians and helped to make the Holocaust possible. I am not saying that Christianity caused the Holocaust, but I am saying that apart from the anti-Jewish images so common in Christian teaching and preaching for centuries, apart from those anti-Jewish attitudes of Christians, Catholics and Protestants alike, it is doubtful that so many baptized Christians would have been such compliant bystanders to the persecution and murder of the Jews. During World War II and the Holocaust, the soldiers of the Third Reich were busy fighting a world war on two major fronts, and by 1942, Nazi officials and military administrators were administering nearly the whole of Europe. Hitler and his generals did not have the resources to commit large numbers of people to their annihilation machinery, but they did not need to do so. They had plenty of people under occupation, non-Jews, who had been deformed by centuries of the teaching of contempt for Jews and Judaism. There were plenty of people only too willing not to get involved in what was happening to the Jews. The Nazis needed bystanders who would not interfere with their dirty, rotten killing business, and they found them, millions of them, standing on street corners, peeking out from behind window shades, lurking in dark alleys. Most bystanders were quiet citizens who wanted nothing more than to get on with their private lives. The quiet citizens stayed home, safe enough if compliant enough. One by one, Jewish families disappeared from their apartments and houses in city after city throughout German-occupied Europe. They disappeared from the marketplaces, in towns and villages, from the neighborhoods and schools. Their quiet neighbors watched them go. This brings me to the topic of rescue and rescuers during the Holocaust, a subject that Eva initially was reluctant to address when she taught her students at Montclair State College in New Jersey. She deliberately omitted the topic from her Holocaust syllabi. Two people persuaded Eva to rethink her position. The first was Rabbi Harold Schulweis. He was a rabbi in California, and he was the founder of an institute for the righteous, an institute that did draw attention to people who helped Jews during the Holocaust. Eva met him in 1978. He attended a lecture about the Holocaust Eva gave, during which she made no mention of rescuers. When he asked her why she was silent about people who tried to help Jews, she said she feared doing so might trivialize the suffering of the victims. Rabbi Schulweis disagreed with her. He told her that she must speak about rescue and rescuers during the Holocaust for the sake of historical truth and for the sake of giving hope to our young people. The second person Eva met, she met through his book, Lest Innocent Blood Be Shed. That person was Philip Haley, a professor of philosophy at Wesleyan University in Connecticut. His book tells the story of Le Chambon-sur-Lignon, a small, predominantly Protestant Christian village in a mountainous region of south-central France. During the war in the Holocaust, Le Chambon became a refuge for several thousand Jews fleeing from the Germans and their French Nazi collaborators. André Trocmé, the Protestant Christian pastor of Le Chambon, his wife Magda, and his deputy pastor Edward Tays led the villagers in their nonviolent resistance to the Nazis and in their efforts to help Jews fleeing for their lives. Once, when Le Chambon was raided by the collaborationist Vichy French police, who were looking for Jews to arrest, Pastor Trocmé told them, "Here we do not know Jews, we only know men." For the villagers of Le Chambon, there was no us and them. There were only men and women and children who needed their help to survive. Lest Innocent Blood tells the story of Le Chambon and how goodness happened there. Philip Haley and Rabbi Schulweis were both Jews. I think Eva said to herself, well, if Jews can write and teach about rescue and rescuers during the Holocaust, so can I. And so she did. When Yehuda Bauer, an Israeli Jewish scholar, asked Eva to research Catholic rescuers in France during the war and the Holocaust to determine to what extent, if at all, Christian teachers had influenced the rescuers in positive ways, Eva took on the project, spending time in Israel and France, interviewing Catholics about their rescue work in France during those terrible years. What Eva discovered was that it was as easy for Catholics in occupied France to say, the Jews are a problem, as it was to say, the Jews are not my problem. In fact, too many French people, in effect, said, the Jews have nothing to do with me or mine or us. We have our own families, ourselves, to worry about. We have our Catholic churches and schools to safeguard and protect. But there were some people who could not say such things. There were some people who could not turn their backs on Jews in occupied France during World War II and the Holocaust. Of course, people acted for many different reasons. For some French people, helping Jews was part of their resistance to Nazism, a patriotic duty. For others, helping Jews involved something more. Some rescuers, in Eva's experience, before the occupation of France by the Germans, already had a real love for Jews and Judaism before the war. Rolande Birgi is one of them. She spent much of the war in the French Alps because it was close to the Swiss border. She always made sure in finding families who would hide Jewish children that the children's faith would be respected. On the day of the week when French children were away from school to attend catechism classes, Rolande saw to it that the Jewish children were taught their own scriptures by a priest. Eventually, she was arrested by the French police. An official came to her cell to interrogate her, asking her why she helped those Jews who killed Christ. Her answer was clear. "My dear sir, let me tell you something. Anyone who has any catechism at all knows that it was not the Jews who killed Christ, but our sins." As Eva observed, we have here an example of both the teaching of contempt and the overcoming of it. Then there were the two Germains that Eva interviewed. Germaine Ribiere was a Roman Catholic Christian. Her life was rooted in a deep Christian faith. When Eva asked her what kept her from leaving the church, given the French church's passivity, even collaboration with the Germans that she herself witnessed, when she asked Germaine what sustained her faith, Germaine Ribiere answered simply, Christ. She told Eva, "I come from a region of France where there are vineyards. When I read in the gospel Jesus' parable of the vine and the branches, I understand. I know what a vine is. The analogy is perfect for me. Humanity is the body of Christ." Germaine Ribiere spoke with Eva about consistency in her belief and action. Inconsistency, she said, is not possible. Whoever says he or she loves God and does not love his or her brother or sister is a liar. The other Germaine Eva interviewed was Germaine Bouquet. She was 21 years old when the war broke out. Her mother died when she was 2 years old. Her father, a highly educated man, a lover of the classics, an atheist, raised her. He was kind and loving, but he had little time for clerics or for the church. She grew up in a vibrant intellectual atmosphere devoid of all religion. But when she was 8 years old, her father decided to have her baptized despite his aversion to religion. He did so for social reasons. He thought it would increase her chances for a good marriage later. As a youngster in school, Germaine Bouquet met a catechist named Francois Durkin. Germaine also met a school chaplain, a priest from the local parish. Both the catechist, Francois Durkin, and the priest, Eva doesn't name the priest, had a great influence on Germaine's religious and spiritual life. They taught Germaine and her classmates their religious education, but they did not use questions with set answers, the teaching method for religious education at the time. Rather, as Germaine recalled, they taught in a vibrant manner. Everything was commented on, everything related to Sunday's gospel and the Bible. Everything was alive. We learned the sacred history of the Bible. The Jews were for us, the people who gave us Jesus. As to anti-Semitism, she encountered it neither at home nor in school. During the German occupation, Germaine Bouquet was involved in a resistance network, obtaining false papers for people in danger, hiding Jewish children whose parents had been deported. She married Jacques Bouquet, who also was involved in resistance activities. After the resistance network in their area dispersed because the situation became too dangerous, Germaine and Jacques moved in with her grandmother in a remote and isolated corner of France. When Germaine was contacted by a teacher from a neighboring village and asked to take in a man whose family had been arrested and was himself being hunted by the Gestapo, she did not hesitate. As she told Eva, she did not want to or need to know the man's name, but he insisted. "Did you go to high school?" he asked her. "Yes," she responded. "What was your history text?" "Mallet and Isaac." "Well, I am Jules Isaac," he said. During the weeks and months, Jules Isaac stayed with Germaine Bouquet. He worked on the manuscript that would become his book, Jesus and Israel, a groundbreaking study about Christian anti-Judaism in centuries-long teaching, preaching, and prayer in Christian churches, Catholic and Protestant alike. Isaac's research in that book eventually would lead Isaac to Rome, where in an audience with Pope John XXIII in 1960, he persuaded the Pope to put the question of the Church and the Jewish people on the agenda of Vatican II. Perhaps you're asking yourself, well, what kind of women were these two Germains and Roland Berkey? What kind of people were they? If you read Cries in the Night, Women Who Challenged the Holocaust, the book Eva co-authored with Michael Fayer, or if you read Eva's essays about rescue in the Memory of Goodness, the book of Eva's essays John Roth and I edited, you will discover that these women were ordinary human beings. They lived in the same moral sphere as the other more than 41 million people who walked the footpaths and streets of occupied France. They breathed the same air, had the same fears, faced the same challenges as did so many other French people during the war and the Holocaust. They were not larger than life, and we must not make them larger than life. They were life-size during a time when humanity was diminished. As Eva herself wrote, we should not think of people who helped Jews during the Holocaust as heroes or saints, not only because they themselves refused this label, but because it would let us off the hook too easily. If we put them on a pedestal, we deprive ourselves of the possibility of identifying with them. These women and men can become models for us, not to be admired and venerated, but flesh and blood creatures who embody the potential for goodness that exists in all of us. I think this is also why Elie Wiesel used to insist that we must know about these good people who helped Jews during the Holocaust. We must learn from them, and in gratitude and hope, we must remember them. And that precisely is what Eva did. In March 1998, the Vatican's Commission for Religious Relations with the Jews issued its long-awaited document, We Remember, a reflection on the Shoah. We Remember contains some excellent material. The sections warning about the dangers of anti-Semitism, for example, go well beyond previous Vatican documents on the subject. But We Remember is flawed by a long footnote on the wartime role of Pope Pius XII. A footnote which skewed the document and made it seem as if the Roman Catholic Church was more concerned about its own reputation than about the suffering of the Jews during the Holocaust. As you may know, Pope Pius XII is a controversial figure. Almost anything one says about him and his leadership of the Catholic Church during World War II and the Holocaust ends up mired in controversy. There are writers on the Catholic side who clearly think Pope Pius XII not only was an exemplary church leader and a rescuer of Jews during the Holocaust, but they argue he should be canonized as a saint in the Roman Catholic Church precisely because of his actions during World War II and the Holocaust. Papal critics, on the other hand, point to what they consider to be the failure of Pius XII to condemn either Nazism or the Holocaust. They maintain that the key factor shaping Pope Pius XII's policies during the war and the Holocaust was the Vatican's goal of preserving, at all costs, the status of the institutional Catholic Church in Nazi Germany and in occupied countries throughout Europe. To resolve these controversial issues, Catholic and Jewish scholars wanted the Vatican to open its archives from World War II so that they could examine relevant documents. But Vatican officials refused to do so. They maintain that 11 volumes of relevant documents from that period had all, I can't say the French title, so I'll give you a translation. Acts and documents of the Holy See related to the Second World War. That these 11 volumes already had been published, and scholars could research the documents in these volumes to answer whatever questions they might have about what Pope Pius XII and the Vatican, including priest members of the diplomatic corps in Germany and occupied Europe, did or did not do during the war and the Holocaust. But instead of tamping down criticism, the criticism only increased. Dismayed by the continuing attacks on Pope Pius XII and the document We Remember, a reflection on the Shoah, Cardinal Edward Idris Cassidy, in charge of the Vatican's Commission for Religious Relations with the Jews, proposed creating a joint panel of Catholic and Jewish scholars whose task would be to study the 11 volumes of documents from the World War II era, which Cardinal Cassidy and other Vatican officials said that up to that point had received little attention from historians and journalists. Consequently, with the cooperation of the International Jewish Committee for Interreligious Consultations, Cardinal Cassidy formed the International Catholic Jewish Historical Commission. In 1999, Eva was appointed to it, as were Catholic scholars John Morley from Seton Hall University and Gerald Fogarty from the University of Virginia. 3 Jewish scholars, Michael Morris from the University of Toronto, Bernard Suchecki from the Free University of Brussels, and Robert Wistrich from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem also were appointed. In October 2000, Eva and her colleagues on the Historical Commission submitted a preliminary report to the Vatican, which stated that a scrutiny of these 11 volumes of Vatican documents does not put to rest significant questions about the role of the Vatican during the Holocaust, nor do they settle questions about the actions of Pope Pius XII during the war. They argued that the published documents do not shed light on how Pope Pius XII and Vatican officials decided upon the policies they followed during the war or during the Holocaust. They submitted 47 multi-part questions to their contacts at the Vatican. These questions, the Holocaust Commission claimed, could not be answered by the documents in the 11 volumes. The Commission members requested a response to their questions from the Vatican. Needless to say, this did not sit well with the men at the Vatican. Once again, men at the Vatican argued that many of the 47 multi-part questions had already been answered in the published documents. Controversy ensued. Eva resigned from the International Catholic Jewish Historical Commission in December 2000. Why she resigned is not clear. Perhaps it was because she was frustrated with the Commission and how its members worked together or failed to work together. Or perhaps she was frustrated with the Vatican and its lack of cooperation with the Commission. Whatever the reason, she never seemed to make a big deal about it. Perhaps Eva agreed with the sentiments of Dimitri Cavalli, who wrote an article that I read about the International Historical Commission, an article that was entitled, "The Commission That Couldn't Shoot Straight." I don't know, but what I do know is that in July 2001, the 5 remaining members of the International Catholic Jewish Historical Commission ceased their work without ever gaining access to the Vatican archives. It wasn't until March 2020 19 years after the International Catholic Jewish Historical Commission made their request that scholars were given access to those archives. While I do not know what Eva thought about the International Historical Commission, its work, or her participation in it as a member of that commission, I do have a sense of what she thought about Pius XII and how he chose to fight the evil of World War II and the Holocaust. In an essay published in a book about Pope Pius XII and the Holocaust that John Roth and I published in 2002, that is 2 years after she resigned from the International Historical Commission, Eva had this to say about Pius XII. History made him Pope, not only at one of the most critical junctures in the Roman Catholic Church's life, but also at a critical watershed period in the entire history of the West. In the face of one of the most brutal dictatorships the world has known, which led to the murder of innocent Jews and other victims, neither Pius's personal holiness and trust in prayer nor his chosen tool of quiet diplomacy was enough. Clearly, Pius was a sensitive man, not impervious to the sufferings of the war's victims, whether within or outside the church. Nevertheless, Eva wrote, the means with which he chose to fight the evil were inadequate. What was needed was a strong prophetic voice. Pius thought he had spoken with such a voice. That it was not heard, or if heard, not understand, is part of the tragedy of this man and of the church he governed. Is there a message for us today in Eva Fleischner's comment about Pope Pius XII and how he chose to fight the evil of World War II and the Holocaust? Perhaps it is something for us to think further about. Allow me to conclude with these few words about Eva Marie Elizabeth Fleischner, a woman of conscience and courage, who evolved from a pre-Vatican II Roman Catholic catechist, a lifelong member of the Grail, to a post-Vatican II Roman Catholic scholar and teacher of the Holocaust, who was involved in Jewish-Catholic dialogue in the United States and beyond. She was a woman unafraid to confront her church's past, unafraid to take history seriously, and unafraid to change. What was it that enabled Eva to evolve from an intelligent and committed Roman Catholic teacher of the faith to an accomplished and distinguished Roman Catholic Holocaust scholar and teacher involved in Catholic-Jewish dialogue? In his book, Mercy, The Essence of the Gospel and the Key to a Christian Life, Cardinal Walter Casper says this: dialogue, rightly understood, presupposes a listening heart and reciprocal listening to each other. Eva had a listening heart. She listened to the anti-Judaism in Christian theology she learned about in 2 graduate seminars at Marquette University. She listened to Jean-Francois Steiner's book about the Holocaust. She listened to Elie Wiesel's Holocaust memoir, Night. She listened to what was happening in the post-war French Catholic Church as it struggled to come to terms with its failures in responding to Nazi Germany's occupation of France during World War II and the Holocaust. Eva listened to French Catholic women who helped Jews during the Holocaust, and she listened to her Jewish and Christian colleagues on the International Catholic Jewish Historical Commission. For more than 30 years, Eva Fleischner listened to Jews and Christians, Catholics and Protestants, in the classroom and at conferences. She listened and she asked questions. Questions like, is there something inherent in Christian teaching that created a context for the unprecedented anti-Semitism and mass murder of the Jews during the Holocaust. She asked whether or not the few who helped during the Holocaust could become the many. She questioned, what is holiness? She asked, should Pope Pius XII be canonized? She asked, did Pope Pius XII do enough to fight the evil of World War II and the Holocaust? She asked, could he have done more? Dr. Eva Fleischner believed that dialogue between Christians and Jews about the questions and issues raised by the Holocaust and its aftermath should not remain isolated in esoteric gatherings of scholars. Those questions and issues should permeate our churches and synagogues, our colleges and universities, our classrooms and conversations, but we need listening hearts if we are to learn from such discussions. I encourage all of us to listen and learn from the insights of Eva Marie Elizabeth Fleischner, an accomplished and distinguished Holocaust scholar, a woman of conscience and courage. Thank you.